Red zone colors morning like the sunshine, moving through my mind. Blues on the skies, why the sun will never die. Earth keeps rolling on and on. You saved it from the bombs I could see. All children of all the 1960. But it was saved once before you. Nobody really cared. Saved again and through again, and then no one would really share. There was really not much love there. But fear's another weir on the weaving of my pattern, in the devil's mind sinking through you. In the fourth of the door that was in whorehouse, thinking about Morehouse, dreaming on them fat cheeks, thinking on them big old winks and things and strings, and dolls keep on dancing in my magic mountain pride now. Things keep on moving in my wondering why now. But it's alright in the skies of your mind, it's all love. Just let yourself be to be free now. Be to be free. Don't judge what ain't a judging me. Just be now be. You got to be free. Be yourself in everything you can be, like a leaf that's high on the tree, a summer flower, or just a cocoon, or something like an empty room. To be what I can do by myself, I like a little privacy and something to eat besides wieners and meat and dog food.
This podcast assumes that you have a general knowledge of the Tate-LaBianca murders. Sharon Tate Polanski, Jay Sebring, Wojciech Frykowski, Abigail Folger, and Stephen Parent were murdered on Cielo Drive in Los Angeles on August 9, 1969. Lena and Rosemary LaBianca were slain in their Los Feliz residence the following night. Charles Manson, Charles Watson, Susan Atkins, Patricia Quenwinkle, and Leslie Van Houten were convicted of those murders. Say hello to the Goodbye Helter Skelter podcast. Okay, and this is the Goodbye Helter Skelter podcast saying hello to you. I hope everybody's here. I hope everybody can hear me. Yes? Okay. Welcome to Live 8. This is the Goodbye Helter Skelter podcast, live show number 8. I want to welcome everybody here. And before I begin this week's show or this episode, I want to announce that the guest I had on 2 weeks ago, Jason Hay, does a very fine podcast called All Is None. And it's based on Charles Manson's music and the music that surrounded him. And he has just put up a new episode dealing with Manson's recordings at Universal with Gary Stromberg and that whole thing, that set of recordings that we all know so well. So you would do very well to go over to Jason's podcast, All Is None. You can get it on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, anywhere you go. It's well worth a listen. It's highly recommended. Please go listen to it. It's very good. And that's all for that. Very good. And so now I'm back, and we're going to have this week, hopefully for the last time, we're going to be talking about motive and the Cielo Drive murders. And in order to do that, I brought back a guest that I had several weeks ago, James Dawson. He's done a lot of work in the archives. He's known as the Manson Archives, and he's done a lot of work looking into transcripts and finding clues that might help us find out what the motive actually was in this thing. So I'm going to bring him on right now, and hopefully he will come on. Are you there, James?
Hey, everyone.
You can hear me fine?
I can hear you great, George.
Perfectly. Okay. Now, I thought what I'd do first is bring everybody up to date about what we went over on our last podcast, because I don't want to be repetitive. So if that's all right with you, I'll do that. Okay. Basically, James found a lot of testimony from the girls, Susan Atkins, Brenda McCann, Gypsy, I believe, and Patricia Krenwinkel, giving various Linda Kasabian rather more involvement with the crimes than is generally believed. The girls testified about Linda, and mainly the most interesting thing was they testified that she suggested that the Cielo Drive house would be a good place to kill everybody because she had been burned there on a dope deal. Now, we looked into that further and trying to find out if there was very logical that could happen, and we determined that if she hooked up with anybody at Cielo Drive in July, it would very likely have been Wojciech Wajkowski, and very likely introduced by Charles Watson rather, who had previous connections with the house, having been there many times. So we determined that it was possible for her to have made a contact with somebody on Cielo Drive. We determined that with leftover funds from the money she stole from Charles Melton, she would have had the money to afford it. We didn't know too many more specifics about that, like specifically which drug and the money amount. We do now. Is that all right? Are we up to? Does that sound good to you, James, so far? Okay. I want to show you another thing that James sent me, and it's a bit of the transcript from I think Susan Atkins during the penalty phase of the trial, and she said Linda come off with something like, "Well, I know some people." She said, "You remember the $1,000 that I had?" I told her, "Yeah." She said, "Well, I went up to some people in Beverly Hills and asked them for some kind of drug, MDA, LSD. Oh, anyway, she went up to buy something from them and they burnt her for the bread." So now we have a dollar amount that we're looking at, $1,000, and that's certainly an amount that Linda Kasabian would have been able to come up with. Now, let me just bring people up to date so we have an understanding of what that is. $1,000 in 1969 is worth over $8,200 today. So
yes,
it's not a small amount of money. So if everybody has seen that transcript, I'll get rid of that and we'll get back to the live portion of the show. So we also think, now that we know that, we also concluded, James, did we not, that the drug burn was possible motive for picking the house, but not for the murders?
Right.
Yes?
Yes. Okay.
Everybody's up to that. Now, there were a few things that we thought did not fit the drug burn scenario. And one was that actually the main thing was that it didn't seem like the victims recognized the killers, which wouldn't be likely if they had had previous experience with them doing drugs.
Right.
That was puzzling to us. Now, since then, I've come up with a couple of more things that give me pause as to that theory. But before I go, James, do you want to add anything to what I've said so far? Or,
yeah, I mean, after all doing all this digging, and I'm not even convinced that now. I've spoke with Bo who runs the Cielo Drive website. Mm-hmm. I spoke with Bo, and I can't believe I forgot about this, but it's actually true. And the defendants, Charlie, Susan, Leslie, and Patricia, had access to all of the police reports and the evidence reports by discovery.
Right.
So when I read that about Susan, and then when I spoke with Bo about that, the MDA is mentioned, and just noticed that she just says the M word, and then she says some other drug, LSD or.
Right.
So she had access to knowing that was in the Cielo Drive residence.
MDA, yes. Right.
Yeah.
Because that's on the property report that they found 10 capsules, and also Wojciech and Frykowski and Abigail Soldier had MDA in their bodies at the time they died. I don't think that was in the police report, but it was in their autopsy.
It's in their autopsy, yes.
Yeah, I don't know whether the defense would have gotten that.
Yeah, well, they got, according to, it's in volume 2, and I actually sent Paul, when he and I were discussing it, what Charlie had specifically requested. And anything that pertained to the evidence towards them, the police report, all of that they got. Mm-hmm. And even at one point, Linda wanted phone numbers. This is before she flipped over to the defense.
Right.
Prosecution, rather. She wanted the phone numbers.
Mm-hmm.
That's the
Okay.
only thing they couldn't have was the addresses and phone numbers, but anything that pertained to them, they could have.
Right, and I think Bugliosi mentions that in Helter Skelter, that they were afraid that the people would be in danger if they gave away their phone numbers and addresses. But
Right.
we'll get back to the fear later.
Yeah.
I had a couple other things that I thought of since then that made me think it wasn't likely to be a drug burn. One of the things was that, you know, Bobby Beausoleil said in his interview with Truman Capote, which is, I don't know how bad that interview can be going through those two people, an unreliable witness added to a known embellisher and fabricator of facts for writing. But it occurred to me, Beausoleil said that the people up at Cielo Drive were ripping people off for drugs. And it occurred to me that the people up at Cielo Drive at that time period were Wojciech Frankowski and Abigail Folger, a 36 or 5-year-old layabout boy and his rich girlfriend. And
Yes.
they didn't have any muscle, it occurred to me. So I don't know how you could rip somebody off for $8,000 without some muscle to deal with whatever happened. So
Right.
that seems odd to me that there was no crew up at Cielo Drive, there was no gang, nobody that he could rely on if anything went wrong. So the lack of muscle was one thing that I thought was kind of strange. You don't rip people off, you know, unless you can handle the consequences.
Right.
I don't think Wojciech Frankowski and Abigail Folger were set up to do that. Another thing about that is I was wondering if Linda Kasabian, who, if she had arrived at Spahn's Ranch with nowhere to go, and I would assume penniless if she had nowhere to go, even if she came up with $1,000 within a few days through Charles Watson and Wojciech Frankowski, would she really be willing to invest that money, $1,000 or $8,000 today, in a new drug? Unless, of course, she had tried it and really liked it and said this will sell. Now that's possible too.
That is possible.
We're going to shorten this time frame a bit before we're through with this podcast.
Yeah.
I've got some things from the police report that narrow it down quite a bit more. It's still possible, but
yes.
You know, I mean, it's not impossible.
With it being a hallucinogenic as well.
Pardon me?
I say with it being a hallucinogenic as well.
Yes, exactly.
She loved her hallucinogenics.
Right, sure.
Paul just asked, so you guys think the kids read evidence and made that up? I honestly do. That's my opinion. And I'm going to go into something, and George, I shared this with you too.
Excuse me, what did Paul ask him?
He said, so you guys think the kids read the evidence and made it up?
The girls, you mean?
Yes, I do.
Yes, I do.
And I sent this to you, George, and I'm going to.
I'll tell you why I do, in case somebody thinks, oh my God, they're lying. They were at war. You're going to lie.
Yep.
When you're at war. I'm sorry. So that takes care of that.
I sent this to you, and it was something that Robert Hendrickson had said when they were making the Manson documentary. You remember that?
Yes.
Yeah. Some correspondence took place, and Sandra said to him, you know, that the murders were committed because of a drug burn. This is the first time that it's ever mentioned. Mm-hmm. And I checked the first two books, Five to Die and The Family. Mm-hmm. The first time that it's a drug burn is mentioned is in The Family. Mm-hmm. And that's from Ed Sanders, and it's page 339. This is concerning Gary Hinman. Mm-hmm. On page 339 of the first edition, it said Linda was manning the incoming calls that day, and Beausoleil gave her the bad news, but said everything was okay, and he was remaining silent. Now, Linda testified that she heard about Gary's murder from Bobby, and Mary filled her in the rest. Mm-hmm. Then it later says Beausoleil himself has said that Linda was upset that she asked what could have been done to help him. A discussion was had, and copycat murders came up. Mm-hmm. Then on page 239, it says Susan testified that after Bobby called, Leslie, Sadie, Linda, and Katie discussed ways to get Bobby out. Copycat came up. Mm-hmm. But then it goes into can't remember the page because we got so many notes here, George. Yeah. But yeah, it's in Ed Sanders reports is not what was in the police reports, because it was supposed to have been 63 kilos of marijuana, $50 worth of speed and hash, and LSD.
53 kilos of marijuana.
Yeah. They supposedly came from Gypsy, and Gypsy told Vern Plume.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of that stuff really, when I remember one of the dollar amounts they were talking, something like a $12,000 LSD deal. I mean, I just can't imagine that much money. That sounds like braggadocio to me. I just can't see it. So
Yeah.
I would tend to take all of that stuff and pretty much disregard it.
Right, because the first time that this drug burn has come up was when Robert Hendrickson was filming the Manson documentary, and that correspondence that took place. And I believe that correspondence was Ed Sanders, because Ed was there working on the family at the time.
Right. Okay. So let's see. We've got that, and we've got that now.
Paul is wondering, at war with who?
Oh, at war with the system. That was
what does war have to do with it if it's for love of brother or copycat?
They were at war with the system that was holding Bobby Beausoleil,
Yeah.
the beast that was holding Bobby Beausoleil, and that was now holding Charlie and the three girls. So that's the war. I mean, there's war on Lena LaBianca's stomach. I mean, it's a war. So.
And Patricia did say that that the only thought that was going through her head when she carved war into Leno's stomach was, this is a man who's not going to send his son to war.
Yes.
That's the only thought. And she said on the night of the Tate murders that the only thought that was going through my head, that this is X amount of people, that Hollywood system, something like Hollywood system won't be polluting our environment or something like that.
Yeah, there won't be 5 less people driving cars. I just knocked over my water. Excuse me, everybody. Let's see. Okay, yeah. Let's see then. Yes, I believe Charles Watson fessed up to carving the word war in Lena LaBianca's stomach, but that's not an issue. So I want to go over some things here from the talking about MDA and the drug burn angle, and this is from the police report, and I'm trying not to read the whole thing, but it says Doyle and Harrigan, these are two of the drug dealers that were questioned quite extensively by the police, and Billy Doyle. They were in Pick Dawson. They were questioned pretty thoroughly. I mean, to my mind, they were cleared. They were frank with the police. So Doyle and Harrigan became quite friendly with Frykowski and Folger. This was mainly due to the fact that Frykowski was interested in the known drugs on the market, in addition to future synthetic drugs that were being made in Eastern Canada. Doyle and Harrington told Frykowski that they would obtain a new synthetic drug, MDA, from Canada and allow him to be one of the first to try it. This conversation or agreement apparently took place sometime in the early part of July 1969 at the Polanski home. And then Witold K. Kazanowski was present at the Polanski home in the early part of July and overheard Doyle and Harrigan tell Frykowski they were going to get him the drug known as MDA. Kazanowski did not see Doyle and Harrigan after this meeting. Then, in mid-July, Doyle left for Jamaica with Charles Tacott to make an underground film about the effects of marijuana. Harrigan made a trip to Toronto, Canada, and brought back a supply of MDA and possibly other drugs via commercial airlines. It is known that he supplied at least a portion of this MDA to Frykowski. It is possible that Frykowski was given this drug by some other emissary 2 or 3 days prior to the murder. Now, when they say it is known that he supplied at least a portion of this drug to MDA, they know it because Harrigan told them he did it. They said, we're not going to bother you about any of your drug transactions unless they're connected with the murders. And the MDA was not connected with the murders, and Harrigan was not connected with the murders. So he told them freely what he did. So we know that Harrigan gave MDA to Frykowski. And if this is in mid-July, you've got the time frame narrowed down to July 15th that the MDA is around. Maybe yes. A little later if it took Harrigan a few days to get over to Cielo. So now you've got the MDA coming in after July 15th. You've got Sharon Tate-LaBianca arriving home from Europe on July 21st. And that's a 6-day window that we have now for them to be dealing drugs out of the house, in my mind.
Yes.
That the drugs were available, and before Sharon got home and put her foot down and said, we're not doing this stuff anymore. So to me, that narrows the timeline down considerably, but it is also still doable. It's possible.
Yeah.
So
if you'll look, the family Silver said, and according to Ed Sanders, the family, they did have muscle to pull off a burn, movie friends of Sharon. And recently they had carried out a video buggering at 150 CLO on someone. Yeah, that video has just, that was Doyle. And that was, I checked into a lot of that. That's mentioned in Mama Cass's book, The Flogging of Doyle, at that certain party where he was supposedly tied up and assaulted. It specifically says in Mama Cass's book that it was rumor in the hills. And it even quoted Peter Tork saying something. So I researched a lot on Peter Tork, seeing if he said anything, and there was never nothing Peter ever said.
Yeah, these are pretty nebulous clues that don't seem to go anywhere. Rumors are fine, but there doesn't seem to be any evidence to back it up. I believe when the police questioned Doyle about it, he said, I don't know, maybe it happened.
Yeah.
You know, so that's not a real solid avenue to go down. I mean, and don't forget that the maid was there while Sharon Tate-LaBianca was away several days during the week, and other people were there, and certainly when she got back. So I kind of don't think that goes along the lines with Dennis Hopper and all that stuff. No substantiation to any of these rumors. But I do think it's possible that Linda, I think it's very unlikely, but I think it's possible that Linda did get burned by somebody at Cielo Drive for $1,000.
It is possible.
If she wanted to buy it, you know.
It is possible.
I have another. That's another thing I wanted to bring up. If Frykowski was interested in getting this MDA so that he could, I think he wanted to deal it. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's possible.
Yeah,
I do know that on the night that Abigail's mother spoke to her,
yes.
Abigail was, according to that conversation, Abigail was in the process of leaving Frykowski. Her psychiatrist had given her enough strength to leave the relationship. So it's very possible because he had no income coming in. He was living off of her. Right.
So then he might want to say, I mean, if he was aware of her intentions, he might have said, well, gee, I better set up something to back up. And what could be easier than dealing drugs? And of course, I don't know why you would, for your first drug transaction, you would burn somebody for $8,000. That's not a good way to establish a business. You should at least wait a while and get some people on the line before you hook them. But I guess he could have done that. Maybe what would he have done then? I mean, he would have had the $8,000.
Well, we're close to $42,000 in 1969 money.
Well, yeah. Okay.
But I do know that Abigail was in the and when she returned home, that was the beginning of the end of those two.
Okay, that night, you mean?
Yes, when she returned home, when she was to return home, I believe it was the next day for that social gathering. That was the beginning of the end of Abigail and Wojciech.
Okay. Wonder if he knew she was reading. They were both doing MDA. Did you find out anything more about MDA, James? I think you said.
Yes, I sent you. Let's go over that too. I just had that pulled up from the Journal of Psychoactive Drugs. Yeah. If you looked at the testimony, Nagachi said that even at 33 milligrams, nobody would know what it would do to them because it had not been studied enough at the time. But now now it's becoming a medication. I checked into this, and I actually shared this with Marcos, and his mind was blown that it's becoming where it can be tested on people with anxiety, depression, and PTSD. And much like ketamine, it works.
Are you talking about now or then?
No, now. It's now.
Oh, okay.
They actually have ketamine clinics for it, and you can have this treatment done too now.
Okay, so you mean they're finally going legitimate with it and using it for legitimate therapy?
Yes.
Up till now, it's been pretty much a recreational drug.
Yes.
And I believe they said it started getting popular recreationally about 1963 or 1964. That's Wikipedia for whatever that's worth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, in smaller doses, I'm not sure how it. I'm going to have to check into the actual study and how it works with people that have anxiety, PTSD, and depression.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, if you look at the testimony, Nagachi said that 33 milligrams, nobody knew what it would do to them.
Mm-hmm.
But it is similar to LSD and what they call Molly, MDMA. The only difference is it's a hallucinogen.
Mm-hmm.
The side effects are increased levels of affection and empathy, significant boost of energy and excitement, increase of self-confidence, feeling of euphoria and pleasure, and it also has impulsiveness, increased heart rate, sweating, thirst, nausea, restless, insomnia, irritability. And then, unlike MDMA, it causes a more energetic feeling. The high lasts longer. It can last about 12 hours. A high on MDA can last 12 hours.
Yeah. Now, except for the last things you read, it sounded like a good thing you might want to give your neurotic girlfriend that was thinking. And I noticed that in the autopsy report, they said that Frykowski had 0.6 milligrams of MDA in his urine, and Abigail Folger had 2.4 milligrams in her urine. That's 4 times as much. Now, I don't know how that goes back to tell you how much they took. I didn't know how to calculate. I know that information you sent me had some dosages that were considered.
Yeah, the dose to feel the smallest effect of it is 20 milligrams.
Okay.
Just to consider it, light dose is what they call 40 to 60 milligrams. What is commonly taken is anywhere from 60 to 100. Then strong and heavy is 145 and up.
Okay. So that's today.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But if they were to snort, just like I think just to snort like 13, what they would consider 13 milligrams, it takes two hours for it to reach its half-life.
Mm-hmm.
So it's already peaked in 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
But the plasma half-life is 6 to 7 hours. It's how long it'll stay in your blood system.
Okay. Oh, okay. So, well, then, so they would have had to have taken it 6 to 7 hours before they died.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or, if it was if they snorted it, or it makes me wonder if Frykowski actually snorted his for him to have the lesser amount.
Hmm. Well, I believe they found it in capsule form in the house.
And then there was the powder that was in Sebring's jacket and in the car. But if you look at Helter Skelter, and that's where I got the drug inventory from.
Yes.
The powder in his jacket and the car, it was never tested. It was never tested. And I consulted the first editions with Helter Skelter for that and the 25th anniversary.
I thought it was cocaine.
And it didn't say. It just said it was on pages 26 and 27. Let me find it. 1 tube white powder, Sebring's jacket. 1 vial containing white powder, Sebring's car. That's all it said.
Okay. Well, we know believe he had an affinity for cocaine, so that would explain that. And that's not really too relevant to talking about Frykowski and the drugs he was doing. Also, Jay Sebring also had, I think, a 1/4 ounce of weed in his car. There was a 1/4 ounce of weed in the house. Oddly, I thought they said they found 30 grams of hashish in the bedstand next to Wojciech and Frykowski, which is not a small amount of hash, actually.
No. And if you look at the actual drug inventory that was found at the Tate residence, even looking at what Jay had on him, because he didn't live there.
Right.
And contrary to popular belief, and I consulted actually Winifred Chapman's testimony.
Mm-hmm.
That poor woman went through hell seeing the bodies,
mm-hmm.
and she had no reason to lie. And in fact, had to be treated for shock afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
he wasn't a frequent visitor at the residence. And just by looking at, he was not a frequent visitor at the residence.
Right, right.
Looking at the drug inventory that's in Helter Skelter alone, and that's what I saw. That's what I cited. Those folks were just very light drug users.
Yeah, right.
Very light. Now, I did find the container the one container containing 7 triangle green tablets and 1 yellow capsule at the front desk, and it wasn't ID'd. That was, if I remember correctly, that's when Klonopin, around that time, is when it was first started being prescribed.
Okay.
And it was a green pill and triangular. And so is an antihistamine called a Tarex.
And what would you enlighten us to what the Klonopin is?
The Klonopin is more like it serves for 2 different reasons: anxiety disorders, insomnia.
Okay.
And Klonopin's a pill you can take every day, whereas its sister pills like Xanax you can't take every day. So you got Ativan, Xanax, and Klonopin are 3 of the most popular benzos, and Valium was around at that time as well. And it too treats anxiety and insomnia. So it's possible that one of those 7 triangle pills could have been either a Tarex, which is a very strong antihistamine, or Klonopin.
Okay.
And with them doing MDA, it would make sense that they would have a benzo like Klonopin around, which is the strongest of those 3, the Ativan, the Xanax, and Klonopin. Klonopin is the strongest and lasts the longest, so it makes sense that they would have something like that around to help them sleep.
Okay. All right. Well, now you might wonder if there was I'm going to go off on a different track here.
Sure.
You might wonder if the police were investigating Harrigan, Doyle, and Dawson so thoroughly, why they would not investigate another perhaps supplier. I know they had a lead on Joel Rostow, which they checked out, presumably. I don't know how much they checked it out. In the police report, they said they were going to get back to him. I imagine they did.
Yeah, he took a polygraph and passed.
He did? He actually did take a polygraph and passed?
Yeah.
You're sure about that?
Yes, that's what my research led to. He took a polygraph and passed, and he told the police that he concocted the story to impress Charlene.
Okay, well now you didn't get that from. See, I got that he took a polygraph and passed from H. Allegra Lansing, but I wasn't.
No, I did not get that from her.
Okay, you got it from.
No, I tend to stay away from that one.
No. I didn't know, because that was the only.
Yeah, no, I'll send you the link where I got it from.
Okay. Well, if he took a polygraph and passed it.
He took a polygraph and passed it.
Well, he could have beat the machine too. I hear if you put a thumbtack in your shoe, you can do that.
Yeah.
Okay. But anyway, my thought is, if they investigated Doyle and Harrington and Dawson, and let's say they investigated Rostow too, and it didn't go anywhere, why would they not pursue another group of drug people? And I got to thinking about that. They would be happy to do that, except there was one problem that had arisen during all these murders. And that problem is a man named Charles Manson. And I think the police started noticing that between the Hinman murder, the murders on Cielo Drive, and the murders on Waverly Drive, this fellow Charles Manson was involved in it. And they got it in their minds that he had the power to command people to kill for him, hypnotize them, robots, zombies, mutant hippies. And I believe that scared them so much that they decided that they would go after Manson and take him out and get rid of the power that they thought he had, that he didn't really have. But they thought, this is the most dangerous man in the world. He can talk and people will die. So we should take him out. We don't really care about the drug angle or where it came from. We have an opportunity to take this person out of circulation. We can frame him. We not frame him, but we can make up a motive. You cooperate with the press, you get the publicity. He's guilty before he even walks in the courtroom, and he'll go away. We'll get the death penalty for sure, and that'll be the end of that. And we don't have to be afraid of his power anymore, because they really did fear that power that they thought he had, that he didn't have until, of course, they gave it to him. When they started saying he's Jesus Christ and the devil, he became that.
Yeah,
And
he gave
so,
them. He just reflected back to them what they said.
exactly. So rather than go after these drug dealers and clean it up that way, they had a double. They could say, well, we can go over here and get this character Manson and take him out of the picture because he's so powerful. We fear him. And if you don't think that they thought that, all you have to do is look at the news today and see that they still think that.
Mhm.
With Leslie Van Houten, they will not let her out. They are so
I don't believe
afraid.
she's out either.
They are so afraid of the whole Manson mind or whatever you call it. I mean, I can tell you personally that they are. I was not allowed for years to talk to Charles Manson because I was talking to Lynette Fromme.
Yeah,
And they didn't want me to be passing messages back and forth.
because they considered Lynette Charlie.
They considered Lynette would do, I guess, whatever Charlie said to do, and that
Yeah.
he would tell me and I would tell her, and that would happen. So they told me, you can talk to Lynette or you can talk to Charlie, but you can't talk to both of them. So I made the choice to talk to Lynette because Charlie had people helping him do things, and she wanted to do a book, and I wanted to help her do that. But that was the case for, oh, gee, how many, see, boy, it was years I was not allowed to do that. So, I mean, and I'm nobody. I have no record. I've never done anything. I'm not, and we weren't doing anything. It was just the fear. And I remember once they found her phone number in his cell, and they were very upset about it because they thought that he was communicating with her.
And some people would say that Lynette, she would kill if she had the
The what?
There were some people out there that said, Lynette, she could be, she had it in her to be a killer and stuff like that.
Well,
she had ample opportunities, but she didn't do it.
Well, I mean, when you get down to it, I would hope that everybody has not that I'm advocating that they go do it, but I mean, there is self-preservation and circumstances where everybody should be able to kill. And in fact, when you're at war, the government expects you to kill, and they'll give you medals to do it. So that, to me, I think just generally every person, I'm not going to say every with 8 billion people in the world, but certainly most people could kill easily, no matter how much they think they couldn't, whether it's protecting a family, whatever jam you get in. It's amazing to me. I study a lot of true crime and read a lot of true crime besides this case. And it's amazing to me how quickly people resort to murder.
There's something Linda Carroll said, then why hadn't he been arrested on his numerous parole violations? If you look at the time, probation and parole was not like it is now.
Yeah.
Charlie, if he was caught drinking, they'd charge him $20 and slap him on the hand.
Right.
Because I've seen a document where he was fined for, I believe it was for drinking, and they fined him $20.
Yeah. They were busy and they were lazy, and
they didn't care.
They didn't want to go through all the paperwork.
No.
Con for something that the reason he wasn't jailed for those charges is they never pursued it. They didn't care.
And Marco said, were they looking at Manson or looking at hippie communes or cults?
Mm-hmm.
I think they were looking at Manson and the hippie communes and themselves.
Well, they certainly were looking at hippie communes and quote cults unquote. But I think once they got hip to Manson and what he had going for him, I mean, just the power of his personality. There's so many things about him that they disliked. His way of life, his way with women. There's so many things about him not to like.
And let's be truthful, he did teach a lot of people how to fend for them. I mean, they were the garbage runs. Look at all of that food that people are throwing away.
Sure.
That fed numerous people, and that's still being done today.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep, sure is. There, you can get a lot of. I worked in a store for 3 years, and you could live off the stuff they threw away.
Mm-hmm.
We would write it off and take it home and eat it.
Mm-hmm.
So the waste of food in this country is one of the biggest crimes there is.
Yes, it is.
So anyway, we can still see that the fear they have for the Manson mystique, if you want to call it, and Leslie Van Houten not being let out, and Bruce Davis, and also Bobby Beausoleil all those people who otherwise would have been let out a long time ago. Because I understand they're clearing out the lifers in the California prison system. They're getting rid of them. The old guys, they're letting them all out. A lot of the guys I knew inside when I visited Charlie are out, and some of them I never would have thought got out.
Really?
These are bad guys, and they're out, and some of them are okay, and some of them, who knows?
I mean,
I was always surprised when I visit Charlie and Shu, and they'd have some guy in the cell next to him because he had to be in Shu because security housing unit because he was so dangerous, and then they'd say, well, he's getting paroled next week. So he's going from the super secure section of Supermax prison to the streets in a week. And to me, it's like, isn't there like a halfway point? He's going from being super dangerous to being out on the streets. So they let people out unless they're really afraid of them, or they're afraid of the political repercussions. Now, it's my understanding that probably the California Supreme Court's going to duck this one.
Yeah, like they did with Charlie's appeal as well.
Yeah, they're not going to touch it. In which case, the lower court, the appellate court, ruling would stand, and she's going to be out pretty soon. And that's going to be a whole new chapter of this. This case. If they had executed Charlie and the girls, much as I hate to even say that, in 1970, we wouldn't be doing any of this. It would be a forgotten crime. Yep. But since they let them live, they live for another 50 years. They're still alive. Leslie Van Houten getting out. The nephew of Jay Sebring is outraged. He's writing letters.
Deb is too.
Not that she had anything to do with his uncle. I don't know if he ever knew him, but this is going to go on for as long as anybody connected with the case is alive.
Yep.
It's not over yet. It's not over with the conviction.
I heard Deb Tate's getting involved again too.
Who's that? Deb
Tate.
What is she going to get involved in this Leslie thing?
Yep.
I do not know why those people are allowed to have anything to do with Leslie's conviction. She's not convicted of murdering their relatives.
Nope. But I guess it's because the victims' rights, but they're not.
But they're not.
They're not victims of.
They're not victims of anything Leslie did.
No.
I don't think she was convicted of conspiracy for the Tate murders. I think she was just convicted for conspiracy for the LaBianca.
And then when she was retried, I believe there was something in there about robbery too, and I think they counted in the fact that she stole those coins and stuff.
Well, we're going to look at that too because we wanted to talk about the motives, and I have here the police report,
Andrea Ball said that Deborah Tate still has her.
Never go anywhere without your homicide investigation progress report, and they list as the three possible motives. The first theory is that they, let's see, blah, blah, blah. The killers entered the residence. Okay, this is the hired killers theory, which they're not hired killers. They were not hired by somebody.
No.
They were not sent by anybody to kill people, but they did go there with the sole intention of killing the people in the house, I believe. Therefore, that makes the hired killer theory the one closest to the reality. Even though, because that was the motive. The motive wasn't a robbery. And then the second theory is that they, blah, blah, blah. They were delivering or collecting various type of narcotics. An argument ensued over the money. I think they break that down into three things. It could have been a bad drug deal gone wrong, or the guy decided to keep the drugs and the money. I think they broke that down into three subcategories later in the report. But that's where they go with the drug theory. And then the third theory was that the suspects went to the Polanski home to commit a residential robbery. Now, Which they did. Now, they did take a few things, but that's not the motive why they went there. I think $70. Yes?
Jay had $80 in his wallet and a watch on that was worth $1,500.
And I looked that up today. That would make that well over $9,000 today. And I went online and looked up Cartier watches, and yes, indeed, they are that expensive.
Yeah, and none of Sharon's jewelry was touched either.
None of that was touched, and that leads me to another thing. Well, if robbery wouldn't be the motive, but it also indicates to me that they didn't recognize the value of a Cartier wristwatch when they saw it. And if they saw it, I mean, they were moving pretty quickly. I don't know if they had time to notice this watch, but if they did, they didn't seem to have any way to get rid of something like that. that they were
Well,
connected into some, underworld enough that they would have a fence to take something like that and deal with it. So, but I don't think robbery was a motive.
no,
They did take some things, some coins, I think. There was a lot of stuff at the LaBianca house. There were no signs of ransacking in either
in
residence.
neither place. No.
Yeah, so, and the big coin collection that Lino had, and he had a sizable gun collection, mostly antique guns, but still, you could do something with them. They'd probably be not too traceable, I don't know. But so robbery's not the motive. So that leaves us with the motive would either be drug related, which we have conceded is possible that it might have been the
It
motive.
is possible, but
the motive for picking the house. And then, of course, that leaves us with the only other motive, which is the get brother out of jail motive.
and there are the police did notice the similarities in the two. While
Right.
there was some speculation, people had Sharon was cut across the face. She was never cut across the face.
Mhm.
Abigail was,
Mhm.
and then Gary Hinman was cut across the face. So there's a similarity there.
Right.
Let's see, Gary was stabbed in the heart twice.
Yes.
Sadly, Sharon was stabbed in the heart 4 times.
Yeah. 3 or 4. Yeah.
So
And
the similarities
that
are
doesn't
there.
make sense to me. Speaking of, not to get too far off topic, but they talk about Gary Hinman. They say they stabbed him and they went out of the house and they could hear him making noise. And so Bobby went back in and they smothered him with a pillow or something. But, I don't think if you stab somebody in the heart twice, they're going to be making noise too long.
No.
I also don't think, given the location of the Hinman residence up on the side of the hill, that anybody would have heard him anyway, even if he was screaming, probably
No.
back then. So that takes care of the Hinman.
But
I do believe maybe it's in Tex's book or one of them. He says he cut Sharon on the cheek, but I don't know how much of what he says is what he heard somewhere and mixed up. Not a credible guy.
no.
I mean, so if his testimony matches evidence like the cut screen, then I can go with it. But not much else. There has to be something to back up anything he says.
Did you read Frank Guerrero's the painter's testimony?
I did not.
He closed the window and put the screen back up.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was conflicting testimony between Susan and Linda about the slit in the screen.
Mm-hmm.
Susan said he did not put a slit in it. Linda said he did.
Mm-hmm.
Susan said the window was open, but Frank testified that he closed it before he left.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was a dining room window. He was painting the next room over, which I believe the windows were open, actually. And this is getting into another thing. I was speaking with one of the other viewers here. Is the muddled thinking behind this crime? And this viewer, I was trying to get him on today, but he didn't want to come on. He said, what do you think of the fact that they carried their bundles of clothing up to the house from the bottom of the street, climbed over the fence with them, laid them on the ground, went in the house and murdered everybody, came back, got their bundles of clothing and went back down to the car and then changed? Why take the bundles of clothing up and then, if you're not going to change there,
Right.
why not leave them in the car? That's muddled thinking. And it's another example of muddled thinking when you're saying, gee, why would they cut a screen and go with a window when the room right next to it had the window wide open and no screen? These are not clearly thinking people here. Speed can really twist up your brain, and and adrenaline and everything else, and the hectic nature of the crimes themselves is going to throw you off a little bit. But I just don't see this being as a very well thought out professional crime. As far as being a retaliatory hit it sure was sloppy. If you're gonna go in and take down a bunch of people for a drug burn or something like that, I don't know if I'd go in with a bunch of knives and maybe one gun, but
Right.
they had to use knives to make it similar to
the slash that was on Stephen Parent's arm. Somebody did Tex forget he had a gun?
Well, I've wondered about that too, and I wonder if Tex is right-handed. Was he? I don't know. Was he?
I believe he was. But there was something I wanted to bring up to you too.
Yes.
Do you remember the official Susan Atkins website?
I may
That was run by
remember.
James.
Okay, I'll say I remember it, but don't ask me for specifics.
Well, there was a point on there when she had to have a blood transfusion, and James Whitehouse was publishing this information when it came in.
Oh.
And I'll have to go back and get it. I was actually wrong on Susan's blood type until I looked in some of my notes. O negative.
She was O negative?
Yes.
And the blood on the porch was O positive?
Yes.
Okay.
So we know Susan's blood type. And they said that, I know that somebody had told me that Charlie's was O negative as well.
Okay. That I don't know. I do know that I have some more blood thoughts that I'm going to go over in my next program about blood when I bring the blood guy back. But
Yeah.
we're going to talk about that.
And Tex is supposedly B, and that came from when he got stabbed in prison.
Okay. Wow, somebody stabbed him?
Yeah, he was stabbed in 2013.
Okay. Wow.
Imagine that.
Yeah, 2013. Boy, that's a long time later, too.
Yeah.
Why'd they hit him? Do you know why they hit him?
There was some kind of altercation. Tex thought that Tex was cleaning something up, and the dude was acting weird or something, and just got him right in the back. So,
Yeah. And that can happen outside any day now, too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I will go back through and I'll dig through those notes, and I'll take a picture of that with Susan's blood type.
Okay.
So you'll
Very
have
good. Okay. So I think we've gone over the, let's see, they had the power. They wanted to get Manson. We've gone over the drug burn. We've narrowed it down quite a bit. We've ruled out robbery, and we've narrowed down the window of possible drugs activity from about July 15th to perhaps the 21st, 6 days. You could do it. She had the money. The MDA was there. Now, I think somebody commented earlier, one of my favorite viewers said that if you're used to doing LSD and then you did MDA, you would be ripped off. You would think you were ripped off. Now,
Norman Maroon says Sharon has a cut on the left side of her face, starting from the mouth. Sharon doesn't have a cut. That's rope burned.
Yeah, right.
That was rope burn. It wasn't a cut. And there was something else too that's conflicting. I call it which version of Linda you want to believe. During Texas trial, she testified that the whole $5,000 was spent on dune buggies. And if you look at the raid report, 4 dune buggies were taken.
Right. Well, I looked into that, being a Volkswagen owner. In 1969, I believe you could get a new, I don't know if I have that here.
I tried looking that up, but I couldn't find it.
No, you just type in Google how much did a 1969 Volkswagen cost, and they were under $2,000.
Yeah.
So they could have ripped off 5,000, bought 2 dune buggies, and still had $1,000 to do the MDA deal with. I've also heard that the money for the dune buggies might have come from the money they got from Juanita Wildbush, but I don't know.
That's the other option I heard too, but yeah. I call it which version of Linda you want to believe.
Yeah.
No, I found it interesting. In the last podcast, I said to read June Emmer's testimony.
Yes.
Well, Bob posted an article where Irving had threatened June if she didn't come in and testify.
Mm-hmm.
And June said Linda only lied a little. But if you read the testimony, her father kicked her out of the house, the apartment he was staying at, because she was taking items and selling for drugs.
Right. He said that in the newspaper too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, Linda. Yeah, she's a bad piece of work, for sure. So what? Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I wasn't going to go ahead. I'm waiting for you to go ahead.
No, I think we got it pretty much covered, George, on this one.
Okay. Is there anything in the text, in the chat rather? And Linda did.
That's what I was going through.
His interview. What kind of help would Bobby have believed they could really pull off? Who knows what those people thought? No doubt about that. This was a cut. It was a document I saw a few years ago. You can easily look at the autopsy report. It's online. Just type in Sharon Tate autopsy, you'll get it. That'll tell you whether there was a cut on her.
Yes.
And Bobby sounds like more of a leader than Charlie, and maybe wanted to be. Sure, I agree about Leslie's case having wanted infamous. Yeah, Leslie, this is going to be interesting because what's going to happen when she gets out.
Yep.
It's going to start a whole new story.
James Watson said, "Bring Cinnamon the chicken back too."
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I could do that, but right now Cinnamon's about 20 miles away from where I am right now, so we can bring her back and have an appearance when I do the blood. When I do the blood one, because that's what she's in. Because I do have some more things to do about the blood evidence. I talked with David York a few weeks ago, and I'm trying to get him to come back and talk about some of the problems that police have with mishandling evidence. And I've also got some more questions to ask him about the blood, because I've done some more experimenting with that. And we'll get back. I hope to get in touch with him and bring him back in a couple of weeks. But we're looking at about 56 minutes here. It's not a bad amount of time to do. I hope that a bug was around $1,200 back then. Yeah, okay, a bug. Yeah, I believe it was $17.99, and then it went up to $18.99, and the convertible was 19 something. So yeah, definitely, you could.
Paul said Tex didn't stab and shoot parents. Someone else stabbed him.
Well, now that's an interesting thing I thought about, and that's why I was wondering why he was left-handed. This is a similar experiment that I wanted to do along the lines of my blood experiment, which is to get somebody sitting in a car, walk up to him with a gun and a knife. What would you do? How would he react? He'd put his hand up?
Oh, absolutely.
How would you?
Yeah, that would be.
The hand went back. The watch landed in the back seat. Cut the band.
Yeah.
Their knives were razor sharp. But I'd like to see how you do that. If he had the gun in the right hand, he would have had to have the knife in the left hand. But I've also heard that Linda cut him. So
that's what I've heard too.
Yeah.
And I know that in that History Channel documentary they did back in, I think it was about 2009, it's been labeled The Night We Murdered Sharon Tate. Mm-hmm. Oddly enough, in that documentary, Stephen's wallet is in the hand of the Linda characters.
In the reenactment, you mean?
Yes.
That's the History Channel?
Yes, it's called. It's been. I've got it, and I'll send it to you. It came out in 2009.
Okay.
But yes, after Parent was shot, the Linda's character, she has his wallet in her hand when she's going around the house, and there was only $9 found in his wallet.
But it was so the wallet. Either she put it back or she didn't take it during the reenactment, which is likelier.
Yeah, I found that interesting.
I don't think that. No, actually, I'm trying to think if she did. I
don't recall anything ever mentioning her taking his wallet.
Yeah,
but she was Tex did tell her to go back to the car and wait.
Well, that's true. She could have, how cold she could have been. She could have reached in and took it out of his
and just left the $9.
Yeah.
But I found that very interesting. But I've got it. You can find it. It's been labeled The Night We Killed Sharon Tate.
Okay.
But yeah, it was really interesting to see the wallet in the Linda character's hand.
And that was on the History Channel.
Yes.
Can we get a garden update? Well, yeah, actually you can. We planted some eggplant. Did I say that last time? Collard seeds. Everything's doing well. Yeah, it hasn't been real hot up here. So yeah, garden's doing good.
Yeah, but I think we're pretty much
important. That's as important as discussing murder. I spend as much time out working in the garden than I do researching this kind of stuff, and that's why often I haven't heard everything, because I'm not spending my time looking into every detail and every possible avenue. I do many more things than obsess about this case, and I hope all of my viewers do too. There's many more things going on, so that's why I can do these 2 weeks and every 2 weeks instead of every day, because I'm doing other things. I hope you are too, folks. Really, it's much more to life than this.
Some parents' wallet steal was in the car with his ID, which makes the cops not notifying his family ridiculous. That is true, but at the time too, they claimed that the cops were all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
I think James Watson said something. I was trying to pull it back up. But during the trial, Paul, they lied and said Linda was the mastermind.
Mm-hmm.
They said she masterminded also, Charlie did, etc. That's, that's one of the issues I've got with the whole Leslie thing is with her saying Charlie said to do this, Charlie says to do that. That's completely removing responsibility from what she did and putting it on something else.
Mm-hmm. But there were not plenty, but several people there that knew what was going on and chose not to participate.
Exactly.
Catherine Scher, Bruce Davis knew what was going on and they didn't go. And, nobody, I don't think anybody, I think the people that went were the people that had an interest in going, the people that owed Charlie, i.e. Charles Watson, Susan Atkins,
Linda
Kasabian. I think Patricia Krenwinkel went because she loved Charlie and would do anything for him and did.
Yep.
And I think that Leslie Van Houten went the second night because she was
Bobby's girl at the time,
former girlfriend, and probably still quite connected to him and would do anything to help him. And of course, Linda thought Bobby was beautiful. He brother, and there's a reason for everybody to be there besides a burn. And besides being commanded to go, because they wanted to go. They're trading under their free will.
Because if you look at it, I'll have to go back and get where it was that I found that where Bobby did say that Linda did answer the call that day. And she was.
I'm going to answer Paul here, Paul Cass. Okay. My point is that they all said a bunch of different things. So who knows who to actually believe? We all kind of cherry pick what fits in our sensibilities. Yes, that's true. But what I try to do is to find some kind of evidence that substantiates what the person says. It's not just, he said he didn't cut the screen. Well, then how did the screen get cut? That's the way I look at it. You can look at any testimony. How much of this testimony in the other direction has no evidence to back it up? It's all hearsay and rumor, and so said this. And, people say things for all kinds of reasons that have nothing to do with reality. So I try to find something in the evidence that corroborates what somebody says. And maybe I'm guilty of cherry picking at times, but that's not what I exclusively do, because I try to back up something. I've not found anything in the brother scenario that is not backed up by evidence, by the actions of the individuals, the circumstances of the crime, the timeline, the dynamic involved, the similarity in the killings, the fact that they happened so quickly after his arrest. There's quite a few things circumstantially that corroborate that theory. And, these other theories, of course, robbery's not in the mix at all. And the drug theory, as we say, could be possible. But that's why I go with the get brother out of jail theory. It's not because it's my pet theory. It's because it's the one I believe that has the most evidence backing it up. Both trial testimony, because you're talking about testimony in the penalty phase. All the girls said it was done to get Bobby out of jail. So do you pick that? Do you pick that? Or do you not pick that and pick the fact that there was a drug burn? Or do you pick the fact that Susan said Linda said this?
Where Tate said that he walked into the front door of the house of the Tate, just opened the door and walked in.
Yeah.
And that doesn't fit the evidence.
Right, that doesn't fit the evidence.
So, if we take something like that, and which was part of Texas cross-examination for Bugliosi, but if we take bits and pieces of that and try to cherry pick it, then we have to look at Texas testimony as a whole and the truth and confirm that as to being truthful. But that's not the case because it doesn't line up with the evidence.
No. He's really terrible. Really. So everybody involved in this is told like 5 different stories.
Yeah.
From Charlie on down. So to different people. So
that's
you really have to believe something that has something backing it up. That's what I look at. So,
Why Helter Skelter on the fridge? Panthers would say that. No, the Panthers wouldn't say that.
no, the Panthers wouldn't say that, but that's coming out of Patricia Krenwinkel's mind, and you would have to ask her why she wrote that.
Yeah.
And maybe they did believe. Well, Helter Skelter certainly was a concept of the ranch. I'm not saying it's made up out of whole cloth, but it's part of the war, and not instigating the war, but just saying this is the war. So,
but why did they?
It's hard. You can't explain. It's hard to explain why somebody else did something, especially.
You can't speak for them, so you have to get it from them.
Right. Let's see what else.
So if you guys believe the love of brother copycat, then do you believe Charlie commanded the murders?
I believe, here's what I believe. I believe that he commanded them to do something to get Bobby out of jail.
That's what I believe, and I believe that Charlie didn't do any part of it.
I don't think he meant go out and commit copycat murders.
Right.
I think he was aware of that possibility, that was something they were considering. And I think he said in one interview even that they said they were going to do that. And his response was, good luck with that.
Yep. Well, he said that there was one interview. He said that he went and he pulled those that owed him a favor to the side and said, you pay my brother what you owe me, or I'm going to pay you what you owe me. Right. Get him out of jail. I don't care how you do it. I don't want to know about it. No conspiracy. Right. Get him out.
Right.
So that's what I believe.
And that fits his personality of being an uninvolved jail person. That's coming out of years of institutionalized living.
The less you know, the better.
Right. The less you know, the better. And don't tell me anything. And I'm not getting involved in what you're doing. If I tell you to go get something from me and you end up going to the neighbor's house and killing him and bringing me the saw or whatever I asked for, I don't know anything. I just said, get the saw.
Yep.
So can you tell I'm working with saws lately? I'm throwing brush on my property.
Really?
Yeah, we had the house burned down once. We're not going to let it happen again. So I've got to clear a bunch of brush.
I don't blame you.
Going to use a, what's it called? A sawzall, reciprocating saw, and take it off at the roots. Haul it off.
Yeah.
Haul it all to the dump. That's what I do most of my days, folks. Working outside.
Yeah, he almost forgot to send me the link earlier.
I did. Let's see, what else do I have to do? Well, I might want to send a link to my guest. That could help. Well, very good. Your house burned down, George. How did that happen? I'll tell you how that happened, Paul. Some clown was hooking up a hot tub without going through the code, and they didn't hook it up. And the resulting wire that they left when they left the property arced, and it started the Valley Fire, which at the time was the third largest fire in California history. In addition to our home, I believe it was 13 other residences were destroyed. It was a huge fire. At the time, it was the third largest fire in California history. This was 2015, and it's since been surpassed, and nobody even remembers it now, except the people that live through it. But many of my friends up here, at least half of them, lost their houses.
That's crazy.
Devastated the community. But and we're still coming back from that.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
So I'm glad you and your family are okay.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, it was pretty bad because there was a lot of stuff in that house.
Yeah.
We were not there. I was very lucky to have a friend go over and get in the house and save what he could. He was using our truck to babysit our chickens, and he went over there and he filled it up with as much stuff as he could. But man, I had over 200 years worth of family heirlooms in that house.
Oh, damn.
So, and not to mention, I don't even want to think of the Charlie stuff.
Yeah, because
we were not able to get out.
There was, from what I understood, that there was a pretty good Charlie archive.
It's still pretty good, but nothing like it was.
Yeah. I hate to hear that.
It's something you really don't even want to think about.
Yeah.
So I won't.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
So
don't let it.
On that happy note, our house is rebuilt and we're doing fine.
Yeah,
it's beautiful. It's beautiful, and we're starting over and going forward from this moment, because that's all you can do. It.
Yeah.
Forward from this moment. Okay. Is there any of California left? I'll tell you, caveman, there's not a whole lot left, but it's still the Holy Land.
Yeah.
That's the way I look at it. It's changed a lot, certainly since 1969, and certainly since I got out here in the 70s. But it's still California, and it's still the Holy Land. So I think on that note, we're going to call it an evening.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll be back in a couple of weeks with the blood guy, and we'll have another talk. And James, if you can think of anything else that we can talk about, please let me know. I'd love to have you back anytime.
Yeah, of course.
We've probably exhausted this as far as we can, unless we find out something for sure that happened in that 6-day period. But we'll look at other things. This isn't going on. Who knows what will have happened in 2 weeks? If Leslie gets out, who knows? We'll have all kinds of things to.
Oh yeah, they said. I heard she could get out. I heard she could get out as early as Wednesday.
Wow.
If she does, it'll just blow my mind.
Yeah.
And this is it'll make a legal precedent where her case will be cited and many others to come.
I was thinking that maybe that was why the California Supreme Court didn't want to get involved, because then people could just say, well, this California Supreme Court ruled, as opposed to an appellate court, which you could say, yeah, but they didn't appeal to the Supreme Court, so it doesn't apply. We'll see. They're going to play all kinds of games with this.
Yeah.
We'll see if Newsom files an appeal. We'll see.
Yeah, like Paul said, they'll have to let Bruce out and Bobby as well.
Yep. Well, I hope they should. They should let him out.
And I remember Lynette saying that she didn't want to communicate with Bobby or anything like that, because as far as the system goes, he's charged.
There's the fear again. Charlie Manson was dying, and they wouldn't let him talk to people he'd known for 50 years. He was dying. These people were in their 70s. Sorry. I mean, who does that? Who does that?
Family Silver said in 4 to 5 weeks, her attorney said.
4 to 5 weeks. Well, good luck with that.
Mega, is Sandy still friends with Leslie?
I can't speak to that. I honestly don't know.
Well, from what I understand, Leslie doesn't respond to any correspondence anyway, because she's afraid it'll violate some form of her parole.
Yes, I would say that's probably correct.
That's what I've heard.
It would. I mean, they can't go near anyone. No, none of them. It's too bad.
I know if you write Patricia, she sends you like a pre-topped letter and signs it.
Mm-hmm. I never wrote to anybody but Manson.
Yeah.
Well, very good. I'm glad everybody came this evening. Good to see you again, James. Good to talk
to you too, George.
And I think we got some good talking done this week, and maybe some good thoughts and more thoughts. If anybody else has thoughts, please let me know. If any of you people would like to come on, of course, I would be glad to have you. All you have to do is write to me at, where is that? That would be contact at Goodbye Helter Skelter. And
it'd be great for at least 1 or 2 episodes of general discussion.
What's that?
A general discussion episode with 2 other people.
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, I might just throw it open and say, hey, have at it and take a chance that, everybody will behave. What could go wrong,
Yeah, no. You got mods to take out the trolls.
Yeah, okay. Very good. Well, like I say, what's the worst thing that could happen?
Right.
Okay. Very good. So I'm going to get rid of this, and I'm going to get rid of James, and I'll say to everybody, thanks for coming. We're always glad when you show up. You're making this a worthwhile effort on my part, and I'm enjoying doing it. So I hope you can come back the next time and see us on the next episode of the Goodbye Helter Skelter podcast. This has been the Goodbye Helter Skelter podcast, the podcast dedicated to the truth about the Tate-LaBianca murders, Charles Manson, and more. The views expressed on this program are solely those of the individual speakers, and they do not necessarily represent the thoughts, ideas, or opinions of any other persons, either living or dead. Visit our companion website at www.goodbyehelterskelter.com. There you can find more information about this podcast. Also, check out the Goodbye Helter Skelter Facebook page for information on upcoming programs. And let us know what you think by way of contact@goodbyehelterskelter.com. We will address any comments, questions, or concerns on future installments of the Goodbye Helter Skelter podcast.